Can we all stand, say the pledge of allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So the first item on our agenda is public audience, and I believe Helen would like to say a few words. So Helen, just state your name and your address for the record.
Helen Peterson, excuse me, I'm winded.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
listening all the way from town hall.
She beat me.
Helen Peterson, 20 Longview Drive. Good evening. In your overarching charge here, you're to review the charter, change it, expand it, and importantly, ensure that the final product reflects the government's empowerment from the consent of the governed. Oh, God. I believe we can all agree on the importance of strengthening the capability and to offer opportunities for the public to participate directly and freely in our form of self-governance. I believe we can all agree that communication is tantamount to good governance. I share my thoughts and how we can have good participation and good communication. Communication must be two-way. Secondly, notice requirements of meetings and agendas must be uniform across all of the town's commissions or committees. Minutes must be better in reporting each meeting's business. Specific guidelines must be uniform. Even though we should all be electronically recorded as you are tonight, the minutes are still our recorded history. Letters from the public must be attached. Now that is, if they're not to be read into the meetings, of course. Our community, fortunately, is rich in the number and in the well-equipped rooms that we have in Town Hall, here at the Public Library, and maybe even at Eno Hall. That's in order to dictate. We have that ability to dictate a uniform expectation that meetings be electronically recorded. Public audience shall be uniformly offered at every meeting across the government. An example, 20 minutes at the beginning of each meeting with 5 minutes for each speaker. If the chair notes that the number wishing to speak is too great, they have the discretion to shorten all allotted time to 3 minutes. Uniformly, all meetings are to be conducted in hybrid mode. The state now requires that their meetings all be hybrid. So I guess thus hybrid now legally means, I guess I'll have to ask you, that hybrid legally means in person as well as Zoom, one and the same time. And public audience should be available in both modes of attendance. Now, I honestly don't know what happens if a group decides to meet only virtually, Zoom. I don't know how that will apply, so I leave that to you. I'm wondering if I missed a page.
Is that Town Hall?
I think I got one. May I ask, this is a friendly, really friendly, I hope you're open to this. Since your meetings are recorded, most of us, a lot of us, I should say, are in the habit of going after meetings or meetings that we missed to see you on TV. And I have a request. When you are talking amongst you, I don't know if the, gadgets are on the table to catch all of you properly, but you're talking amongst you. but you have to remember that there's someone out there trying to catch what you're saying. So with a friendly request, I ask you to please speak well and carefully so that we can all hear you and what you're saying when we're watching the recordings. It's a friendly request.
Thank you.
Gentle reminder.
We should use our theater voice.
I'm sorry?
We should use our theater voice.
Well, I think it's for everybody.
Yes.
In any meeting, the way we conduct our meetings, we have to remember that we're being recorded and that it's better to be sure that we have good diction or we're speaking out across the room. So thank you so much for letting me say that.
Thank you very much for your comments. Is there anybody else who's signed up for public audience this evening? Thank you. All right, thank you very much. So we're gonna move on to the next item on our agenda, which is, Selectman Deal is here to, present to us, his thoughts regarding town manager and board of selectmen and anything else that he'd like to share with us. And he did, provide written comments, which are in our packet as well.
Great.
The floor is yours. So this is just so, I'm sure you may have watched other ones, but this is more of a discussion. So we're here to listen to you, and we're gonna ask questions and,
Sure.
hopefully not put you on the hot seat.
That's great.
Okay?
That's what a bright light is, yeah.
Right. Well, that's SpaceX.
Yeah, that's, oh, and I just got a text that it looks like the Dragon crew landed all the astronauts are
Good.
safe.
Prayers to their-
Back to Earth, so that's great news and a great way to start. So, thanks for the opportunity to talk here and for the work that you're putting in. I alluded to the long meetings, and I can certainly appreciate that, and many of you serve in other capacities as well. So thanks for adding this to the work that you already do on behalf of the town. And I echo the sentiment that we had talked about prior to the start about the importance of civic engagement and sort of facilitating those. And there can be a bias sometimes for those who are already involved and feeling like there's lots of opportunities to engage, but then lots of ways that others don't feel the same opportunity. And so the structure and the ways and means that we form our government can either facilitate that or potentially hinder it. And so I think that's another reason why the work that you're doing is extremely important. In the letter that I sent and tried to structure my comments, I wanted to cover the things that I thought were the most relevant to my specific role. But certainly I have lots of other opinions, and I'd be happy to continue to share those if you have specific questions of me. Not that my opinion would matter any more than any others, but I'm happy to share. I try to be an open book. Or if we don't cover something today, please feel free to reach out, either any resident that wants to know my thought or members of this commission as well. I thought I'd start with town manager, and specifically the form of government, which I think is a little bit of a misnomer. It's not our form of government, it's the process by which we administer the town. There's an elected board, of which I'm a part, and a town manager. I think that there's a lot of value in having the town manager form for us. Having competent professional management in a complex environment like we have gives us access to somebody that can build a team and have the professional skills to administer the organization. In private enterprise, we see a challenge from the founders complex, somebody that has a great idea as an entrepreneur and starts a business. And at many times in the evolution of a new business, there's a need to add administrative support or structure from somebody who has an understanding of running the business. And I think we're at that part in the community because of the size that we have, literally the tax bill that we levy, and the complexity of even just managing the department heads. And to be able to find somebody from a volunteer basis who would be willing to not only stand for election and then run and serve in that capacity, I think is extremely challenging, and probably more so than it is to try to find somebody that we could compensate for that full-time work like we have with a manager. I do think that obviously we are going through growing pains with all of that, from a first town manager and now our second time town manager. There's lots of examples for us of what works extremely well, but I think what makes it work and what can make it work is that strong relationship with the community themselves, but also the board that the town manager reports to, and that strong communication and relationship there. So I hope that you'll find a path for us to continue on the previous charter commission's work in creating this form of government, even though we might find opportunities in structure to further enhance that or clarify rules that you know, we felt might not be as clearly defined or may have been confusing to some. The terms. I referenced in what I had sent to you just regarding the function of elections. And prior to my time now, I served with our town committee. There are town committee members from other parties here, Democrat, Republican, or anybody who's unaffiliated that might have decided to run. We run an election in Connecticut every year. It's a lot to stand for election, to support candidates for election, and I think that can sometimes muddy the waters for our ability to not only recruit great candidates, but also for those individuals to actually do the job that they're there to do on the board or commission that they're serving on, and then doing all the other sort of related political activities. That's not the only reason. I think that there's value in having some continuity as well. We had a major changeover in the Board of Selectmen in this biennium. That can be a good thing in some instances because it can bring in a fresh perspective, and that's never in and of itself a bad thing. But it also creates gaps in continuity that cause missteps. We had a change in the Board of Selectmen and a new town manager all at once too. That's a challenge. For a well-functioning and organized government, I think that there's an opportunity that the population gets a chance to have a bite at the apple and elect who they want to represent them, but maybe it doesn't necessarily need to be the entire all at once. So in my recommendations to you, and it can be a little bit complex in how you word it, would be twofold. Being able to stagger the terms so that there's not a full changeover in the entire board all at once, and or lengthening the terms of the members of the Board of Selectmen so that there's more of an opportunity to get into the meat and the details of running the government on behalf of the people. I know that some of my colleagues on the board have needed the time to get up to speed, and one of the first things that this board did was go through a budget, and many of them never having seen the town's budget in that detail in order to being required to ask the right questions. That is actually the value of having competent management in place too, and the town manager form of government that gives us an opportunity. But knowing the right questions to ask as an elected member too, because of experience or having a deep level knowledge, brings value to that conversation too. So that's why I put that to you as a consideration for us in the revision. The size of the board, I think, is about right. State statute does set some constraints for us on the lowest number and the highest number of members that we can have. I've had questions from some residents, why is it an even number? What if it's deadlocked? I think that that's actually a good thing too. If you don't have a clear majority for something, then there's not a change. That's when a motion fails and all that, and the details of Robert's rules, I think that that's helpful for us. So I don't necessarily ask for or request a change in the number of selectmen. And then also, just from a side and a personal note, I serve as a part of the minority representation on the board too, not being the single minority member on the board is helpful from a collegial standpoint and a well-functioning board. So, the role of the first selectman. This one here I think is a larger change, probably as substantive as one that was discussed in the charter revision and bringing on the town manager form of government. I had served on a board of selectmen previously, coming here to Simsbury. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. When I was a smaller town in Vermont, without getting into a lot of details, there was a village within the town, it'd be like Terriffill having its own council, but then also being a part of the town. And we actually merged those communities while I was there. Long story, deals with highway and road budgets, boring stuff. We elected our chair from among the members. There was something that I don't think that necessarily we would do here too, where we actually traditionally only held that role as chair for 1 year, and it rotated among other members and a lot of other things that I think can work other places but aren't necessarily here, but we can take examples and we can see what works. The reason why I think that electing a chair or presiding officer, or call it the first selectman, because it would be elected from among the members, is that it builds the rapport among the members themselves of who's going to convene and lead the meetings, and who among that group of peers, as leader among the peers, to set the agenda for future meetings and for the town. And this recommendation specifically for me doesn't necessarily have to do with any person there. I think I can work well with Wendy in her role as first selectman, as I hope I would have been able to do if it was Mary or Lisa or any other person in that capacity. But I think that the idea behind directly electing the first selectman may be a vestige of the previous form of government and may not necessarily be suiting us as well as it could. So that's my thought there, and always happy to take comment. You can interrupt me anytime. As other members will know, I just keep talking.
What is your reasoning behind having Board of Selectmen choose who their selectmen would be, as opposed to the people choosing who their selectmen?
The people will choose the members of the Board of Selectmen. I think it's extremely important clarification. Thank you for asking that. The presiding officer for this board would be somebody who sets the agenda, who they no longer necessarily present and prepare the budget like we had in previous years when they were their first selectmen. The role has changed. And so by directly electing the office of first selectman from the people, I think that there's a potentially a misunderstanding about what their role and function is. They really are the leader of the Board of Selectmen, and the entire Board of Selectmen, for instance, sets policy, passes ordinances, and manages the town manager. It is not the first selectman who does those functions, it is the entire Board of Selectmen. And so having that group be able to, from among its members, be able to determine who would best be able to lead them in that capacity, I think has value. And again, like I said, it's not specifically a direct reflection on any one individual, but I think that it can be helpful. So that's the perspective as having seen that work in other places, and then other boards and commissions, in the town, for instance, do that. There's not a first zoning commissioner. There's members of the zoning commission.
Do you think the reason why it is currently the way it is because of the changeover to town manager has created a mismatch between what the first selectman does now versus what they did before the town manager was a part of the government?
It's referenced in statute. First selectman and that office is referenced in statute. It's referenced in the earliest days of holding a town meeting. Somebody had to lead the thing. And somebody had to be a department head for the other department heads. And when our chief elected official was the chief executive officer for the community, it made sense. And I don't think that, I think that it's wrong for the town to keep that model per se, but I do think that if we're considering the best interest and best functioning for that board, the relationship with the town manager, and what's best for the town in its current evolution, that's my recommendation, is that they, just like the other boards and commissions, we elect a chair from the membership.
I have one last question.
Great, thank you.
And that's I promise that will be the last one.
I doubt it.
She's an attorney.
On this topic.
I have one question in 3 parts.
16 parts. As you are an elected representative, and therefore you get to know people and speak to them more than an appointed board, right? What do you think needs to happen within the people of Simsbury to be able to understand that kind of change, if that was something that we would have to consider?
This specific change and building that consensus and buy-in, or getting the right kind of feedback, I guess, is what I'm hearing. I don't know that necessarily the right answer for that. I think that there's a couple of things. We sort of joked about the sociology thing a little bit a while ago, right? There is a significant shift in civic participation, writ large. We actually have a pretty engaged community, so it's kind of tough to really complain about that, because we have a very engaged community. But I think there's lots of reasons why people turn off to politics, and they feel like that's one of the political decisions. And I think that in many ways, that's also the value in our representative form of government, because that also gives the opportunity for the people to find somebody that they think will have the best interests of the community. They have, you know, good values, good morals, good ethics, and can make a good decision. And so that's why we elect representatives to take on these hard decisions. You know, it's hard enough to modify the charter with the group of you and make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and can have, you know, 25,000 people trying to do the same thing. So the right way to engage them on asking the right question, I think it's a real challenge for us to be able to say that we're gonna do that the right way, when I don't know what number of people could actually name more than 2 members on the Board of Selectmen at this time, and me being one of them, that's not, you know, so I think that that's a real reality. I think we owe it to the people in this town, and I try to do this myself, to not only take into account the opinions of people that I'm serving, but also to give them my best judgment, you know, as well. So I do think that it's gonna be two-way. It's gonna be a decision from here, and then the Board of Selectmen to review, and I don't know what the majority will be on this specific recommendation. These are mine to you. But there are lots of opportunities to communicate the change. I think that also over the last bunch of years, there's been a misunderstanding about the structure in government. And that's one reason why I think that either just a title change alone, or the way that we elect, you know, the person can actually potentially reduce some of that misunderstanding, because it will feel more substantive than what it was. If you weren't paying attention and you were constantly electing a first selectman, you might not have realized there was a town manager, because the ballot stayed the same.
Yeah.
Even if you want to be participative, you know, nothing changed as far as you saw it. Benefit of living in a great community that's running fairly well.
Thank you.
Does that help?
I have a follow-up question.
Oh,
You have a
no.
question?
I was
Go
just
ahead.
gonna ask, so do you think if we were to clarify better the role itself, would that address some of those concerns, or do you think it's just strictly would be better if there wasn't a separate election for personal?
I don't know. I don't know that I have a great answer for that. I think that what my impression is that the majority of people will hear the most when they have a problem that's solved. And so if they know who to approach to help them with that problem, if they have a problem with their child in school, knowing that they can approach the administration or an elected member of the Board of Education, that's where they go. If they have a problem with plowing on their street or something else, they're gonna call Public Works. And so there is a natural separation from the individual resident and the administrative body that exists. And I just don't know.
So as a follow-up to that, some of the comments we've heard from other selectmen, including the first selectman, is the definition of the roles, and there's been references to having guardrails, so to speak, where there's more definition of the town manager role and the first selectman role. And there was, I can't recall who it may have been more than one person who suggested changing the names of the roles to town administrator and chief elected officer. So should the recommendation be that the form of government stays the same and that there's a name change and some additional guardrails, so to speak, are put in place? My question is really how do you hold each other accountable? The town manager and the Board of Selectmen, how do they hold each other accountable for staying in their lanes? And not overstepping, going out of those guardrails, because there seems to be some confusion in who does what sometimes.
It's gonna be a lot harder to try to regulate the elected members in a lot of ways, but the law does restrict, you know, what you're able to do. One of the recommendations that I have in my recommendations list to you is adopting, maybe charter is the right place, or maybe through some sort of ordinance that the Board of Selectmen agrees to. It's a policy of what's called policy governance. John Carver wrote a book on this. It's used in corporate boards and nonprofit organizations, and there are examples of policy governance. And in charters and bylaws for other communities, you know, in the country, it's a pretty non-exciting topic, but basically it boils down to this, is that the board is conceived to set policy and budgets for the organization, and you hire, in this case it's a town manager, to implement on that policy within the budget that you set. And that's a pretty clear delineation. I'll push back a little bit, and due respect to my colleagues, I think the charter and statute is fairly clear about what those roles and responsibilities are, what you should be doing, who you should talk to, and what staff should be doing and what staff shouldn't be doing. So I think that potentially familiarizing ourselves with what the rules are will help among all parties. But necessarily seeing that something isn't functioning because of the lack of familiarity with what the requirements are is not necessarily the same. Or it doesn't necessarily get solved by just the mere fact of changing it. So the rules and responsibilities, I think, could be more clearly clarified. But I'd also caution you in your work here that when you set something in charter, it becomes very set and rigid by necessity. And so, for instance, even though I heard great comments from the Honorable Helen Peterson earlier on public comment, and I think that public comment is extremely important. If you were to, for instance, require public comment at every regular meeting of every board and commission, that could actually take away from what the work of each of those boards and commissions is actually there to do, and that's sometimes on zoning, for instance. It could be dealing with an application and the details on that. But in the discussion with charter, having a conversation about making sure that there are avenues and ways for the public to provide comment, but not necessarily specifying at every meeting or whatever the circumstances are. And I don't necessarily know that that's the right answer, but I just say by example, if you put it in charter that it has to be at every meeting, it will have to be, you know, at every meeting, even if the circumstances are different or have changed. So if you are going to outline and delineate in very specific detail what the roles and functions are beyond what's already included in charter, you may unintentionally encumber either a member of the staff or a member of a board from being able to do something that they would otherwise be legally able to do.
Can I pause you for a moment
Mm-hmm.
and ask Bob a question? Am I correct, and the charter's long, so I've read it several times, but that our charter currently allows for public audience at any board or commission meeting, but it's not required?
It's specified, it is required for the board of selectmen.
Right, but it's not required for other boards and commissions, but it's not disallowed.
No.
So they can, at their discretion,
They set their own agenda.
they set their own agenda. So if in fact, to Kevin's point, you don't wanna put something in the charter because then it has to happen all the time, the board of selectmen could adopt a policy in the code, correct?
The policy would apply to the appointed boards and commissions.
Right.
I don't think it would apply
To elected.
Like the other independents.
Okay.
So just to clarify too, before I get strung up, I don't necessarily say that about public comment with regard to the Board of Selectmen. I do think that that's a different circumstance entirely and the functioning of that.
I guess because this whole notion of changing titles, we've wrestled with this a little bit so far. We've kind of heard it in different areas. But if I'm hearing you correctly, though, if we were to change it to, let's say, the chief elected officer, in your opinion, if I'm hearing you right, I think that almost exacerbates the problem in your mind, correct?
It does to me. In fact, I think it would be more clear if, honestly, you elected members of the Board of Selectmen and all of a sudden there was a first selectman at the organizational meeting. Well, what's the role of the first selectman? Oh, I'm the presiding officer. I chair that. The board. Oh, you're the first among the selectmen.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me. You could call them chair, and chief elected officer. Actually, it sounds overly contrived to me bluntly. You guys have the tough job of trying to wrestle through that. I think that the substance matters the most, and for me, the relationships among all these people is also what I would try to solve in the direct election versus electing them from among the members. I think that builds a certain rapport among the members by conceiving it. So that's why
I have a question. question about the public audience recommendation or the idea that you put forth. I do agree that it can become cumbersome for boards to be able to do their work. But we've heard repeatedly, not just from the people in this room, but from the people who wrote to us, that they really do want the opportunity to participate. And so what is your recommendation in terms of how we can help put that concept into the charter without constraining the boards?
I think that in an interesting contradiction, we have never had access to more information in the world history, and yet seem to be hungry for information and never able to find it. We've never had more direct access to elected or other officials because of email, phone, whatever else it is than before, and yet somehow folks feel disconnected. I do think that that's a challenge, and I don't know that necessarily charter is going to solve that interesting conflict. But I do think that, for instance, a board like zoning or planning that have these long things to go through and review and then hear amongst themselves and consider and then vote. I think that that's extremely important work. That's why we put them into the charter and why we elect them to do that function. In order for them to do that work, they need to hear from residents and get input. But if you require it at every time that they gather and get together, they may not, one may overbalance or overtake the other. Because I also don't think, and I don't want to sound like I'm not encouraging public participation, I'm just encouraging you to be cautious about how you require it in charter because of the circumstances, the unintended consequences that it may create. What I would be concerned about is that the balance shifts, and also because we're talking about people, I wouldn't want the circumstance for all of our boards and commissions to be that have real work to do to become overly performative in nature either. They have work to accomplish, and it's sometimes difficult, detailed, and tedious work.
Thank you.
And they have to do it, and because of other rules, they have to do it in open meetings, right? So we have to be able to observe the process and all that. And it's not in a cigar smoke-filled room or something anymore. So, anyway.
Thank you. That's very useful. Thank you.
I have, go ahead, no, Bert, please.
Yeah, he knows what he was saying.
I only have about 15 questions here. So under your proposal, the Board of Selectmen would be elected, and at their organization meeting, they would choose a chair or first selectman.
Sure.
And the role of that person, who's currently called the first selectman, would be to preside over meetings, to set the agenda, and what else, if anything?
Yeah, so I actually don't think that there needs to be a substantive difference from the other roles and responsibilities that are included in the current charter for the function of the first selectman, like being ex officio members of the boards and commissions, setting who are going to serve as liaison from the Board of Selectmen to the various boards and commissions. I think that the role itself, though, being directly elected or being the first among their peers, is different based on how they get to that office.
So currently in our charter, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna take a step in for a minute. In the charter, the first selectman is entitled to a stipend.
Mm-hmm.
So if
I get paid $500 a year in Vermont.
okay, so this would be a raise.
Well, I'm not running.
No, I know, but so would, if you envision this new form, do you envision a stipend still being applicable if the responsibilities of the appointed first selectman versus the elected first selectman are the same? Should the stipend stay or go?
That's a great question. Yeah, I like that question.
A+. Paying attention to this one.
A plus on the question.
I'm sorry I asked.
I, not having served in the role, I think that the duties of that office could be performed without the stipend, knowing that direct costs can be reimbursed by the town through the budget, just like you do with anybody else. If you have mileage you need to take somewhere, you have papers you gotta print, all that. But it does take time, and it takes time and effort away from something else that you may be able to But there's a lot of history in this town about the compensation for the first selectman. And the reality is, the board at its organizational meeting is supposed to set that in the current charter, right? They're supposed to set that at the organizational meeting. And you also have to make a budget that starts July 1st, 6 months before, just like anything else. If you ever saw the movie Willy Wonka at the beginning where the teacher's saying you're gonna have a test on Tuesday for the lesson you learn the following Friday, or whatever it is. So that's kind of how that sausage is made too, which is also kind of backwards and silly. I would regret if the entire conversation around the structure of government rested on a stipend for the first selectman. I think that the question is important and one to be dealt with, but I would put it in the lower end of the priorities from at least my perspective of what's the most important thing facing the town, especially because in charter it allows flexibility for the board to make that discussion and make that decision in the best interest of the town.
Thank you.
So just currently the Board of Education, they elect their chair. The Board of Finance elects their chair. Zoning elects chair. Planning elects chair. Your thoughts on the Board of Selectmen electing a chair in an organizational meeting was, just for information here, was pointed out or was discussed at the last charter revision. There was a lot of discussion, I don't know if you remember that, Jeff, but there was discussion about that for the very reasons that I think Kevin was pointing out, as far as making it a little bit more of a distinction between the town manager and the Board of Selectmen, which, sets policy, keeps communications open. Kevin, I think you stated here at the supervision of the town manager, keeping a direct line of communication about priorities and setting clear policy goals are the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen. And that also keeps that the town manager serves at the pleasure of the Board of Selectmen.
That's correct.
So
That's
I think some of that is already clear in the charter, but I think the concept of a chair being selected by the peers on the board is not that out of bounds, and I think many towns in Connecticut already do that.
That's right.
So I think that that clears up a little bit for the electors, or what the role of the first is. So, I think it's something that's worth a little consideration.
It would require some really strong, clear communication many times to the electorate about what that is, what that entails, because as we know, we don't have a town newspaper anymore, and then what's the.
Well, Simsbury Neighbors United does a pretty good job.
I know, it's a job. It's a job. Citizenry at its best. And so if we were to consider something like this, we'd have to be clear about what we tell the elected representatives. This is what you need to tell your constituents. This is exactly what needs to happen. Otherwise, it can go sideways very quickly.
I think that's a fair point, and I think that a thoughtful communications plan and any change is helpful.
Yeah.
And we have some.
Especially this change.
Yeah, and we have some means to do that. We're recording a meeting, for instance, tonight. Paul's an excellent interviewer on Simsbury community media. I think that there are some ways to communicate that, even though there's not a formal paper for the community. And also, I think that there's potentially some room to communicate this directly from the town as an informational change, so that they're aware, if you were to go that route.
I
Well, yeah,
have a
because-
question on that. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I have a question on that. The town does really do a good job of communicating, because I watch the emails going and so forth, but practically speaking, it seems through Simsbury Neighbors Unite that people don't seem to have all the information that actually did go out. I don't know what my question should be on that, except that perhaps we should note that that is a factor in our town. Because we don't seem to have a central place like a newspaper that can tell us what people can actually see. And I think that's something we should note.
You know, we put public notices, for instance, because the law requires it in the newspaper, you know, about meetings or other things, and it still seems surprising to folks, and that's the reality is that people are inundated with a lot of noise,
Yeah.
you know, about change, and so it's hard to predict what's going to be important for one person. I'll hear about that on an issue that may become before my board or somebody else's, and they wanna ask me what I know what's going on, and say, well, how come I didn't know? And there's a litany, like you said, of other ways and means to find it, but it's really busy over there to be able to find all of it. And some things are gonna matter more to others. Things on open space, for instance, are gonna be really important to a lot of folks, and it comes up on the agenda, you're gonna pay attention to it. And, you know, other things related to the, whatever it is, are gonna be less important. I don't have an answer for that. Like I said before though too, I think that the entire nation is sort of wrestling with these, you know, kinds of things about information sharing and what's true information, and all that is difficult. So I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah, I don't either,
I
but
think
we,
part
I
of
think
it
we
is,
should note it.
when you're counting on this,
Mhm.
your information, it begs for problems. That's just my own editorial, but I also think that, you know, we're gonna have a report, this will be sent out, obviously we're not there yet, but there's gonna be various modes of communication that'll pump all of this out there that we'll get before the election.
Yeah,
And it goes
yeah.
on the ballot.
Because it has to be a
Exactly.
referendum.
Right,
Yeah, it has to
exactly.
go on the ballot,
Right.
and if you remember when we did the fields, when we were purchasing the fields, and it went on the ballot, there were about 16 different stories about it. And everybody had the authentic story, and so we have to just make sure that as our group, if we recommend any change that is not what people are expecting or used to, that we're very, very good at communicating it.
Well, the big story is that Kevin said he doesn't like public comment, right?
Take it out of context.
Take it totally out of context.
Yeah. Wrote that down.
I wanna take you back a minute, cause I think the meeting's going too quickly, so, as you said correctly, right, the town manager reports to the Board of Selectmen as a whole, and the Board of Selectmen as a whole sets policy and sets budgets and provides that guidance. But does the first selectman or the chair or whatever we're gonna call that person, does that person have a particular role in managing that relationship? Because it seems to me that perhaps the fact that the first selectman is elected separately by the public might give that person a stronger hand in that kind of management.
That's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's I think for instance, regardless of the relationship between the first selectman and the manager who has any understanding of the role of government can count votes too. So, if they're able to maintain enough of a balance among that board, then I guess somebody who wanted to could take advantage of that situation, regardless of directly elected or elected among the board, except that a board electing its presiding officer necessitates a different relationship among all those members and the presiding officer.
Does that, however, assume that everybody knows who the other selectmen are? Like, for instance, if we had a board, there are some people who get elected who the town has never met before. Would that disadvantage that person because they don't have pre-existing relationships with other members of the board?
Oh, if that new chair, was very new, no,
or if
But
the
that
people who.
dynamic exists, right? But that dynamic exists today.
Just by
That's
vote.
true,
But, right,
that's true, that's true,
if they're
that's true.
elected directly by the people, or, I mean, they're bound to not know everybody on the
Eric was
board.
brand new when he was elected, so.
That's true,
Mhm.
correct, okay, that's a good point.
No, sir.
You were sort of alluding to a situation which I've heard it discussed, although not in our.
Not as eloquently,
Obviously.
obviously.
But currently, it would take a majority vote of the Board of Selectmen to remove the town manager. So the town manager. would
Which we're
have-
not considering at this time.
No, and I'm a supporter as well. But the idea is the town manager who can lock up 3 votes on the board
Sure.
has sinecure in effect and you think that would change or be less of a dynamic if the board had already selected its own chair.
I think it is.
But maybe that is a problem that we should address separately by changing the terms under which the town manager is hired and fired.
Some communities require a unanimous vote to terminate a contract early, for instance. I don't recommend that or some of the other things too. I just think about what's the best functioning under the best scenario, right? So yes, if there's a crisis, there's gonna be crisis stuff happening. We're trying to fire a manager, stuff ain't going right. That's not where we're at. But if we're trying to work together among a board, having the opportunity to have a say in who that leader is that year or at the organizational meeting, I think has value. That's the only reason for that. I'd be remiss if I didn't address something else that's included in my written comments. If the role of the direct election first selectman stays, already in state statute is referenced, what happens to the unsuccessful candidate for the first selectman, and there's this kind of conversation that's happening that I was happy it could stay in the memorandum that you received from the Board of Selectmen so that I could address it. Here, it's not a consolation prize, it's actually obviously the circumstance under which I serve on the board currently. But that notwithstanding, it's about the privilege of the electorate to have the people serving who have received the most votes. It has nothing, in my mind, to do specifically with the individual, but that's the reasoning behind it. And so, in order to change that, which is included in state statute, we have to include something new and different in the charter to change what's included in the state statute. So I don't recommend that.
Kevin,
Mhm.
so if we went to that the chair is selected by the other members of the Board of Selectmen,
Mhm.
then that wouldn't be needed.
That goes away, yes.
That goes away, okay. My apologies, well, okay, thank you.
What is the connection between the state statute and the way we currently have it, which is the second in line?
Yeah, so, state statute referred in the attorney can
Yes.
correct me, section 9(1)18 refers to the election of the first selectman, and, there's a provision in there for the unsuccessful candidate for first selectman, and the upshot of the whole thing is that, whoever gets the most votes serves on the board of selectmen, that's the upshot.
And so, that's in our charter,
No, that's in the state statute.
that's in the state statute.
Yes, and in order to change it, we have to.
Charter would have to be changed, right, to overrule state statute.
State statute only applies in the towns that don't have a charter. When you adopt a charter,
Right.
it's,
The
the charter
charter.
preempts
Yeah.
that state statutory
Right.
provision because that's a matter of purely local concern.
Right, but we adopted that state statute in our charter.
Yes.
Right.
So you're free to change that in the charter and there would be no conflict with the state statute.
There was a suggestion by one selectman, I don't believe two, but one selectman that it be changed so the people who are running for first also are on the ballot for board, so it's clear to the electorate. I think it's confusing, but,
I didn't think you could
I think statute requires that.
Do
to run for 2 offices.
one for 2 offices at the same time.
believe
I
select.
thought I
board.
read that, I thought I read that somewhere where you can't do that.
I think that's right.
I don't know if that's true. You
At
can't,
the same time, I don't think you can.
there's a, incompatible office statute that says you can't be town treasurer and on the board of finance, that's an example. But I can't think of a reason why you couldn't run for board of selectmen and board of education.
Boy, that would be confusing.
What if you got both?
Whether you serve in both,
If you got both
there are a lot of towns, small
That's
towns.
great for
in Connecticut.
separation of powers, right?
There's a lot of small towns in the state of Connecticut where the first selectman is also the state legislature. So there's a lot of people that serve in more than one office.
This is like that Gilbert and Sullivan Ricardo, the Lord High Chancellor is everything except the executioner. Every office. You know, that's what that looks like.
So I have a recommendation on policy governance in there too. I don't think that it's too far off the rails to reference it in charter, especially since it's an understood a method in a lot of places, just like you refer to Robert's rules and the formulation of the rules of procedure. But I leave that for your discussion. I think that that's something that can more clearly define those roles and responsibilities that we were talking about earlier.
Kevin, did you mean section 412 or 402? Because I'm confused at 402.
I may have made a,
Okay. It's a section that's one sign sentence that says direction to employees. Is that the part of the charter that you're referring
I
to?
don't have the charter in front of me, but I meant the right one.
Okay. It's that section that talks about, the section titled direction to employees is the title of the section, correct? I mean, it says it right,
Section 402.
but section 412 says directions to employees.
Yeah, then I think
It's
I
like
made a-
6 pages after that.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to make sure we were on the same page.
Yeah, no, I think that that's appropriate.
Okay.
Or that's why I said or replace appropriate.
Is the BOS using Carver's policy and governance model now?
No, I'm the only one that says those words, but I think that there's I think I am. There's an understanding, and the charter stipulates basically this rule, that we set policy and the town manager implements it. And elected members are not supposed to be directly tasking employees. That's another function of policy governance as well.
Because we have in the charter clear definitions of who can instruct whom on what already, correct?
Right.
Like, the town manager can only direct
Right.
staff.
Right. But I think what you're saying is that policy governance clarifies that a little bit more, that they can get more information. I actually looked it up. And it talks about those boards which worry that they are only furnished data management wants, meaning the town manager, give them, find that in stating their expectations and demanding a relevant and credible accounting of the performance, they have effectively taken over control of the major information needs. Therefore, the staff no longer has to read their minds. So in other words, it's a clarification of what staff has to provide to the Board of Selectmen.
So does this address the issue that Chair Hebner brought to our attention regarding the Board of Finance, regarding the flow of communication from staff to the Board of Finance to make timely financial decisions for the town? Because that was one of the concerns outlined in her remarks.
I would think so. I mean, it sounds like it does clarify it a lot versus just one liner that says.
I mean, I'm not saying the wrong thing about what Chair Hebner said, okay. Okay, and that was
I'm
another.
not sure what Paul was reading from.
That's the Carver's
Yeah.
policy governance model, right?
Yeah, here you can pass this to Frank, and he can send it around
So,
too.
it also
Sorry,
addresses-
you had made reference to it, and I just, since I had nothing to do, I looked it up.
Retired. Because there were a few other selectmen that mentioned flow of information from staff to the board in order to make decisions in a timely fashion. So maybe that addresses, I don't know, we'll have to investigate this further, but.
Her concerns seem to be more a timely manner, that they can get the day before they have to make a decision, so they have a
Right.
chance to look at it. I don't think there's a
Usually
issue
Friday
with the
night.
quantity.
Usually Friday night.
Yeah.
for a Monday meeting, but
And Kevin, you also made something about, a reference about the personnel director
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
human resources.
It was a concern of mine, honestly, when we discussed this with the town manager in the budget previously, about creating the human resources department, but it's had support from the Board of Selectmen, but because it's referenced in charter, I think it's relevant to determine whether or not that language needs to be addressed or
the title
cleaned up.
changed.
Because the way that the charter reads is a little bit murky. I think that it's reasonable that the town manager can delegate the authority of the function, but he can't delegate overall responsibility. Also bluntly, I think that there could be an opportunity to talk about the human resources director in relation to the support to the Board of Selectmen in the our HR function in managing the town manager, which we're trying to do now, currently just in the regular review process. So I put that to you for consideration, because the charter talks about it, but we have grown to a point where we have an HR department.
Can I ask you a question on that, a little bit to the side, but still part of that? Since there's no HR department mentioned anywhere in the charter, that was an approved policy from the Board of Selectmen? I just wanna know how this HR all of a sudden is now never in our charter, but I'm hearing about it. Probably a month ago, I first time I heard we had an HR department, like,
Right.
oh.
Right.
And nowhere in our charter, so I wasn't sure how that worked out.
I don't think that we're operating outside of the charter or the law. We'll just
I'm
start
just,
there.
I'm just
Right.
curious, but I'm.
But I think that there's, potentially room for an argument, and I'd rather not live in a world where it could be murky. And so I think that clarifying, that specific function, because it says it so clearly.
Yeah.
I think the reason why personnel director is there is because of the last charter change where we had a change. The town manager performed the duties of dealing with the personnel, not the first selectman, which is how it had been before. So I think that that's why the division is there. I don't think that it means to say that only the town manager can touch those things. It's just not an elected member function. So, that's my 2 cents.
How often does the Board of Selectmen revisit code items, like,
Code ordinance?
yeah,
Oh, on a regular basis, there's amendments to the sections.
so do they review the ones that exist
Oh, yeah.
each year and decide whether or not they need to remove some?
There, no, there's
Or,
not.
or,
So
Okay,
jump on
we just-
in there.
As often as the legislature does.
okay,
There has been, overall review of the code of ordinances from time to time. The previous town manager had actually started that, to update the terminology and the gender language and things like that. There's not normally, as a regular practice, a comprehensive review of the code of ordinances.
so, that leads to my question, and I'm sorry to take some of your time, so, some of the comments that we've received from commissioners or board of selectmen or the public are related more to policy, like code things, versus process, which is the charter. So, is it within our purview to, in our final report, to provide recommendations that the board of selectmen consider something to be adopted in the code because we've heard it from the public?
Yeah, the last report, you may remember this, there was at least one recommendation that said, we're not gonna put it in the charter, but it sure would make a good ordinance. So that's definitely within the
Okay.
scope of what you're doing, because you're being asked to put things in the charter you may not agree with. So you may wanna recommend, you can't require, but you could recommend, I think it was the Economic Development Commission, if I remember correctly. But anyway, you could say, we don't think it's appropriate for the charter, but it should be done as an ordinance, because an ordinance is a lot easier to change. From time to time, you could adapt an ordinance to a situation that comes up without impaling the Charter Revision Commission, which is why the departments aren't identified in the charter. The officials are, but the departments are not spelled out. You read a lot of charters where the departments are very articulated. In this charter, it's like departments as the board may be necessary from time to time, language like that. So an HR department is perfectly permissible for from the board of selectmen saying, hey, we need an HR department, and create it without going through the charter revision process. So yes, that's within the scope of your.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Because there was a couple, did it come up at the last meeting? When you weren't in attendance, there was a couple of items that came up during that time that we thought were more appropriate for a recommendation for the code and not for within our purview.
Yeah.
Yeah, even reference to the code.
Open Space Committee is another example that started out its existence as a temporary committee created by the board of selectmen and found its way into the charter not too long ago.
Well, thank you.
Thank you,
Does
guys.
anybody else have any other questions for Selectman Beal? Thank you very much for your time and your thoughtful comments.
It's an exciting.
Yeah, thanks,
Just throw a bunch of stuff at you and then you get to decide. Thanks.
Here. Thank you.
I'm up.
As they say, don't leave town, make yourself available.
Yeah.
What was the town in Vermont?
Northfield. It's right off of exit 5 on 89.
That's what you're known as.
Not too far north.
Yeah, just south of Mount Hope, maybe 10 minutes south. All right, thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item on our agenda is planning and zoning comments. So we've received in our package comments from our town planner, George McGregor, the Weathersfield town planner, the Canton town planner, the Cheshire town planner, the Avon town planner, and then we have comments from Chair Elliott, who presented to us but has submitted some additional comments. We have comments from zoning board members Jackie Dados, Shannon Leary. Am I saying that? I think I'm got them all right, because there was some that came in at the last minute. Okay. And
Is Tony on zoning?
Tony's on zoning, so
Thank you.
we've got some from Tony as well.
I was a little confused with that.
So, prior to our discussion on this, I just wanna point out, I had asked Franklin, because I think, Ron, you brought this up, about, we have this whole list of boards and commissions, and it's a long list. So I asked Franklin to create a spreadsheet for us, so we can keep track of this, in a better fashion than just a long list of all the boards and commissions, whether they're in the charter or the code, if we've received comments, and then a column for eventually what our recommendations would be, just so we can kind of keep track of who's on first, because, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, I thought if you could associate the public comments into each organization, group.
Right,
Then you-
so
then we can have
Franklin was kind enough
it's
to,
disgusting.
yeah, it's in our packet, this lovely spreadsheet. Which, because of my age, I'm gonna have to make larger.
You want a legal paper on.
I might need 11 by 17 at this point.
Big whiteboard.
So, I don't know if we've all had a chance to go through, I mean, we're not gonna read all these, they're in our packet, but I wanna open up the discussion regarding the comments that we've received from the various town planners and the current commissioners who have submitted their comments. I will just start out by saying it's interesting to note that the town planners all want a combined P and Z, and anybody who seems to be on planning and zoning wants to keep them separate because it's working, and why pick something that's not working? So when I read through, personally, when I read through some of these comments, it seems to be a lot of concern over staff hours that are involved in having separate boards and commissions, but commissioners seem to be concerned about having to pay enough attention to the right things at the right time, and especially from a planning standpoint. So I'm gonna open the floor for discussion. Or comments.
That's kind of how I read it too, right? The
Yeah.
folks outside of town thought it was a good idea to combine it. The folks in town maybe had a different opinion of, and Franklin, maybe this is a question for you, and maybe I just missed it. Have we received comments from anybody in town supporting the combined? And maybe I just missed it?
I haven't seen any.
I haven't seen anything.
Yeah.
You haven't missed.
Okay, great, yeah, because I think that's important, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's a,
where's the
Well, just for record, before we start the discussion, I do wanna thank the time of the other town
Oh, of
planners and our town planner
Yeah.
for taking the time to provide the comments, because certainly it's not, expected of these other town planners to provide us this thorough input, but we appreciate it.
Yeah, they did a good job.
They did a very good job, so, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's, I just want, you know, if we're gonna make a change, sort of to your point earlier, I'd like the town behind it, I'm just not hearing that, again, maybe that should be just me.
Well, it's just it's just how it was presented to us that was really confusing initially, which is, you know, there are two schools of thoughts. Do we want to look like those towns? Which is a question that we're constantly asking ourselves. You know, we really pride ourselves in what we look like. The second thing was when we were seated, you know, there were comments at the table, there were comments from the public, and the comments from at the table were not persuasive to me. They said, here are the pros, here are the cons, you know, you could go either way, you know, if I had to choose, one person actually gave us an opinion, another person couldn't choose. Fair enough. But then the public has overwhelmingly told us they don't want them combined. And we are not the experts to know whether it should be combined or not. So you know, I'm going with persuasive arguments, non-persuasive arguments. We have persuasive arguments to keep them separate. And I'm not persuaded based on the people who presented to us that they feel convinced that we should combine them. That's what I saw.
I see kind of our role as there's issues that we can address potentially, and this doesn't seem like an issue really. It seems like maybe there's a better way to consider, and we considered it, but I don't know that it's something that necessarily needs fixing, or there's some glaring reason that X, Y, or Z isn't working, there's a solution to it. It seemed like
Yeah.
no one really had a significant problem with
Yeah,
it.
and the issue that kept coming up over and over again is across the board, a process issue. Like communication of information, people knowing what the minutes look like when the meetings are being held. That's what it came down to, not necessarily about whether these boards need to be combined or not. That's what I heard. And so, there's an issue, there's a larger issue about making sure that what we have is just working properly, as opposed to whether or not it is working at all.
I saw a lot of comments there saying, there was the comments of the planning responsibilities are much different and the focus will be reduced. I know some of the planning and zoning context we got said that was a perception that didn't seem to come into a realization when they combined them, but it does seem like there's a lot of comment that the current operation of zoning does not necessarily allow for all the planning responsibilities to be added. A subcommittee for POCD to maybe be created and somehow, I guess, reduce to 10 or 6 or 8 people and, figure out how to make that work, with whatever changes that involves. That seemed to function fairly straightforward with the two separate and not having the same workload.
Well, I know in the past there's been conversations with just the process by which applications are approved in town.
It's a
And,
process.
and it's a process question, not necessarily a charter question, because maybe the process can be refined at the staff level and at the commission level versus us making such a large change that we're not hearing the public wants. And the zoning meetings are long to begin with. To imagine that they've got to include planning and potentially meet more than twice a month seems, from what we're hearing from some of the commissioners, maybe an undue burden on them.
3-hour meetings.
And 4 times a month potentially, and, I mean, we're talking about how there's been issues with getting enough people to step up and go on these boards and commissions, and this may prevent a good chunk of people from experience not be on this board, which I'm a little concerned about. We have some good experienced
And that
people.
distinction of people who want to be on planning, people who want to be on zoning, when you combine them, is it just going to be people who want to be on zoning and the planning is secondary?
Yeah.
I was also moved by what you asked which was, because you attend these meetings.
Mm-hmm. I
And,
have.
and you would say, you know,
I saw them.
there could be a confusion as to what needs to happen if they were combined meetings. And I've never attended the meeting, so, you know, I'm gathering information on as to how it actually runs.
Well, it was interesting, and Jackie brought this up the last one, is when you look at the planning commission's meetings, there were a lot of canceled ones except for POCD. You look at the zoning, their agendas have been packed. So yeah, POCD causes time for a change in effort, but then if you have POCD and zoning at the same time, you have a developer, an architect and everything, they could be sitting through a 3-hour meeting, and
That's what you said.
I'm thinking, again, as a small but commercial property owner, I would not wanna pay that bill. I just would not, where I could maybe get that done in a 1-hour meeting at a zoning commission versus 3 hours. And then come back again to a planning meeting, and then it just, dark in here? Okay, then my time went on the way. Wow.
The POCD is kind of like a charter commission. It only comes up, was it every 10 years or 7 years or? And it's a
Somewhere around there.
6-month
10
process.
years. And then they have
Yeah.
referrals for subdivisions, I think.
Right.
something like that.
So, so planning doesn't have, it doesn't really have, come into play a lot.
And how many more subdivisions do we really have
It does.
available in
I
town?
think it's interesting that
Find something.
the two prior town planners, Mike Clinton and
Hiram.
Hiram, both have gone on to towns with them combined and said it works
Yeah.
better.
I think what you said was the most important, right? This seems, all the hiccups these have had in the past have been process questions, of how they relate to each other.
Mm.
And I don't, even combining, I don't know if that ever, if it solves that,
Yeah,
right? So,
exactly. Yeah, I agree with you.
I just, I think it's.
Well, and there were, and maybe, I don't know what town planner I'm going back to, it's probably when Hiram Peck was our town planner. There was some conversations at some of the zoning commission meetings, and Jackie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, about when a developer comes before the board, that perhaps combining the meeting to make it not so,
Going to two.
so they don't have to bring their architect, their attorney, and everybody to 5 different board meetings. It's a combined board meeting for the presentation, and then they can discuss it at their separate board meetings after. It's about streamlining things, right?
It sounds like policy again.
You know, because DRB goes before zoning.
So,
Because DRB will make a recommendation, a referral to zoning, but so zoning will have it when the developer sits in front of zoning, but in reality, how many things really go in front of planning? Because if I'm gonna wanna change the use of the Cannon building that's across the street, that's not going to planning, that's going to zoning. Okay? If I wanna take an empty field and make it a subdivision, I have to go to planning first, right? But I have to go to inland wetlands first, and I have to go to a bunch of other places. But, so I'm gonna go on record saying, I'm gonna go back to, we look like Simsbury,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, and I think that's what we're hearing from residents, because we have this process in place in our charter and it's working.
I'd agree with that statement.
Yeah, I second, third.
I don't know. So it is the,
I mean, there might be some wording that has to be changed in the charter, but keeping the two boards separate.
Separate
Is-
and is the or is it something that we can make a recommendation that we not change? And I know we're not voting on it right now, but it's part of discussion, something to think about, that we're not recommending a change to the current charter the way P and Z is separate, but we're making a recommendation that they look at their process to streamline it, because that's what we've been hearing from other people, right?
I think that recommendation has to be made carte blanche, because everybody has told us that.
Yeah.
In all, you know, the selectmen, boards that come up, you know, the public, so we've got to ask, we've got to tell whoever, that, you know, making the process transparent and efficient is going to be key.
Well, I was going to say that, you know, that streamlining of the process seems ultimately to be, in the abstract, the argument for combining the boards. So it just makes intuitive sense to say developers or people with proposals should go to one fewer board if we can manage that. But what I heard is that, even here, is that that's not necessarily going to make meetings more efficient. It's not necessarily going to make the process easier. For me, and I have very little knowledge in this area, what I found persuasive was that, you know, these are boards composed of volunteers, or citizen volunteers. I know from my experience on the Board of Finance, it takes time to develop an understanding of the board's processes, and if anything, these two boards have, deal with matters that are at least as complex as the ones that I've had to learn about. So it does make sense to allow people to stay and focus on what they need to know.
Now, how would we make that recommendation? Because it wouldn't be in the charter except to say, you know, we add process in the charter.
You're going to eventually put together a draft report. And the draft report will recite all of the topics you were asked to look at. And this is one of them. And your report would, if you vote that way, that you thoroughly reviewed it and came to the conclusion that you do not recommend that the commissions be combined, and therefore no charter revision is necessary. And you do that for each of the items that were sent to you, and whatever else you want to look at that's not on that list, that would be part of your report as well. So it's a.
To your point, I would say, maybe you could say, but however,
However,
You know,
However,
yeah.
the Charter Review Commission recommends
yeah.
that the commissions take a hard look at their processes to streamline them and make them more efficient.
is there anything that we can do additional to that to help them make that a reality? Because what happens is if you go to them, they're already very busy. And if we're saying, you know, we want you to realign your processes to make it more accessible to the people in Simsbury, it's just going to be too much.
Well, the scope of your work is really limited to changing or not changing the language of the charter and making recommendations related to why you made the decisions you did. So you would have to either make it a strong recommendation, you could, you know, strengthen the language, but you really
Just don't enforce it.
unless you change the charter, you really don't have any jurisdiction over how they operate.
But
Now, let me just add one thing. You could put in the charter a requirement that the school boards meet once a year or something like that. There are things you could do in terms of charter changes that would may help to streamline the process, although.
Just like tri-boards.
Yeah, right. And that's
Didn't
not
that
in
come
the
up at the
charter
last
either.
meeting to have all
It
the
did.
land
Yeah.
use commissions?
Yeah.
You
But-
know,
they'd say they want to, but they haven't done it in a while, well, they
You
want
know,
to. But maybe make them, but not say within every 12 months, but on a consistent, regular basis, I don't know.
George McGregor points out that 2 to 4 applications a year go to both boards.
Right.
So there's not a lot of bouncing back and forth. And again, the planning commission load has been lightened greatly because, as someone pointed out, there's not a lot of large subdivisions. Everything today in terms of apartment buildings, you know, we just don't need subdivisions.
Well, no, because most of it is repurposing of existing buildings or existing
Right.
space, because we don't have a lot of land. for it, because we've-
Most of those to them are zone change applications,
Right.
and they have, you know, that kind of stuff, which is usually initiated by the town, but can be initiated by the developer. But you could put language in the charter that require them to meet, confer, discuss, things like that.
yeah, I'm thinking of a much broader, you know, recommendation, just generally speaking with process, because that's what the public told us.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't matter which commission or which board they said, it's hard to find out when the boards meet, the meeting minutes are not very clear, and things like that. And then the Board of Selectmen was and the big boards told us about how they needed information ahead of time. And it's just a process issue about being communicated, being collaborated with, and so forth, which takes time to iron out because this form of government is relatively new to us. And so I don't know how the charter could address that because that's in the workings of the boards and the process in which the organization itself runs, which is not a charter question.
And some of that like sounds nice, but I mean, it's like, okay, everyone should get along. Well, how are you supposed to do that?
Or like we should have more use, give me a suggestion.
So I don't wanna like water down
Yeah.
some of the like meatier stuff that
Yeah.
we're gonna do
Right.
with just kind of like overarching.
You can always put in the charter, get along.
Yes. For those that were in the past charter review, you guys made suggestions that weren't implemented. Did you see, or maybe someone can answer this, those suggestions were listened to and maybe adhered or implemented?
You know, I'd have to go back and
Okay.
look at some of them.
I would love to, like, oh, we suggested it, we didn't charter it, but we suggested it, look what happened.
To see,
Yeah.
you know, which ones were and which ones weren't.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. Again, you know, the focus was primarily on town manager.
Yeah.
And were we gonna do that or not?
Right.
And then once that decision was made, it was the changes that were made were, okay, how do we address this big change that we just made?
Yeah.
And which sections that we need to do.
Yeah, that was a big.
I don't know, Jeff, does that
Yeah,
pretty much
yeah,
follow it?
Yeah, yeah, it was all town manager all the time.
Which I,
Yeah.
yeah, that
And we
was,
said get along.
that was a, yeah, it was a big, huge.
Yeah. And we did, okay, just one other thing, we did look again at combining planning and zoning, and that was quickly rejected.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, and those comments were very informative.
Yeah.
So in the previous chapter, the report in the previous chapter, so that was useful to me.
The other big thing was to get rid of the town constable.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
That was the
What
commission
did the
before.
Moderator.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was the last meeting.
That was the one before, before.
You know, we should have a town crier.
We do have one.
Office by the stockade.
Well, we had a town moderator.
Yeah.
That was done away
Yeah,
with. John O'Neill was the last one.
right.
Yeah, we need someone to walk through town and scream out the meeting dates.
No.
Unfortunately, oh, we have one. There is one.
I find that the meetings are pretty clear, I mean, they're all set up ahead of time. They're obvious when they are, if you wanna participate, and you can sign up with email, so you can get the
The
agendas
agendas,
for each one, yeah. The agendas are always minimal.
Some of them are a little vague, though, I will
Yeah.
say that.
Some are pretty vague.
Yeah,
Okay, there we go.
Zoning's is pretty vague.
No offense, but yeah,
Yeah.
or some are just like, what are they talking about? You know, this parcel, or, and again, I go to zoning because it's easier and I follow those closer. But some of them are just, they're talking about, you know, a policy that we talked about the last meeting. Well, what was that policy you talked about? It was a little confusing, so maybe even if there's a suggestion to make some of the agenda items a little more clear for those that aren't living and breathing that commission.
We're gonna discuss this, we're gonna have possible discussion and possible action,
Yeah,
meaning a vote,
yeah,
right?
Hope it's all clear.
Well, then people can decide is this something
I wanna
I
go
want
to,
to participate in or not.
So does anybody else have anything to discuss regarding P and Z?
it was very helpful to go hear from all the other planning.
Frankly, if you can just express our gratitude to the other planners
Yeah.
for their thoughtful comments, because we don't have their contact information, that would be
Yes.
Yes.
appreciated
Thank you.
on behalf of our commission. And thank you for getting those.
Yeah.
Next item is the March 5th, 2020.
Well, wait a minute, what, you have, other commission comments? There was one that we got from, Aaron, Levitt Smith regarding the historical district. Did everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's.
Oh,
The challenge.
yes,
The challenge in getting 3 people
Yes.
to come from the
Yeah.
historic district, and she recommended not changing that.
But
That's the same issue,
but that's
right?
not on the charter.
Yeah,
They're not
there's
in the
still that
charter.
confusion,
They're not in
it's
the
charter
statute
versus
issue.
code.
Right, it was close, but I just wanted to
Yeah,
reference
just so we
it,
reference,
and she
but it's-
sent that.
Yes.
It's code.
Right.
and just to note for the public that any public comments that have been submitted are part of our packet, and there is a tab on the town's website under our commission,
Which,
where all the public comments are posted as PDFs, in
does that,
addition to the commissioners.
does that say on public record forever?
Well, the internet's forever, Melissa,
Well,
and you know
okay,
that.
which meaning like, I have a hard time finding last charter commission public comments, because
If
it's,
you go into the search,
like,
and
we
you
have
put
it
in
now.
the date range, you can
Right.
find older documents.
Right, but like in ours, we have our current charter commission and review commission, and you have all the public comments there. But I wanna go back 7 years ago.
I don't think they were
I don't
posted.
think, yeah.
Yeah, the minutes are there, but I don't think they were put into the minutes.
Yeah, I don't think they
Go
were.
to town clerk's office, you'll find
Have fun.
it. They're on file.
Oh, my free
I'm
Friday
in there.
afternoon at 1.
Right,
Oh,
right,
no,
right, right,
sorry. Okay.
He'll dust them all.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I like that they're there now, because it really helps me to quickly search for them as well, and I
Right.
tell people, hey, if you wanna know the comments, here they
Yeah,
are, if
it's
you
there.
want.
Right.
I just wanna put that on record, just so the public knows that when, we're encouraging people to submit comments.
Yes.
They are posted on public record. We do receive them in our packets, we may not discuss them at every meeting, but we have read them, but we have received them, and they're out there for the public.
Yes.
We're being completely transparent.
Can I just say like one thing, like, so I know like, you know, minutes are extremely important, but like, I don't think people know that the commission clerks, we're not in control, I know it sounds ridiculous, but we're actually not in control of public audience comments sometimes. Like, there are some supervisors who will allow me to really capture what people are saying. And I love that, that's one of my favorite things to do, is I love to represent and recognize our town. And there's some supervisors who will actually, I've had edits where they have deleted public comments and said, you don't even need to write down what they say, just write down, you know, name, address,
Ooh.
things like that. So, you know, when people do certain things with the minutes, it's really not the commission clerks. So although public comments can be submitted, that's great, but unfortunately, depending on which meeting you attend and who oversees that, you know, like Franklin and our deputy town manager, Tom Fitzgerald, they're my supervisors. They love when I capture what our community members say. Other supervisors are just like, you know, list what they,
Just that they attended.
yeah, so, you know,
Okay, well, that's-
unfortunately,
that's
if anyone has, you know, a complaint about minutes, please see that, meetings, like overarching department head, because I have no control over it, and I sometimes I wanna like email our public audience when they complain about the
No.
minutes, I wanna be like, I'm so sorry, like, you know what I mean, because, you know, it's up to my supervisors, and Franklin and Tom are fantastic, but some supervisors.
Okay, just for the record, our commission, whatever said, we want it written in public comment in minutes.
Okay.
From the public.
From the public.
From the
Yeah,
public.
no, I love that.
Yes.
And also, some things that are controversial, like if one of you has like an opinion or something, there are some departments where I can't even write down opinions, I can only write down what decisions were made.
Okay.
So it's very,
Right, just a point of information too, regarding minutes, Robert's Rules of Order is pretty clear on
Yes.
minutes. And what they state is primarily that the discussion is very brief.
Mhm.
This person made a comment, they don't necessarily go into it. And when it comes to everything else, it's like, who made a motion?
Yeah.
What was the motion? Was there discussion? And was the vote, what was the vote? That's it. So, you know, if a commission says or a board says, we're gonna operate by Robert's Rules of Order, then the court goes, boom, that's what you're gonna get, you're not gonna get a whole lot. And, you know, also as a shameless plug here, for Simsbury Community Media, all of the meetings are out there and everybody can go get it, and they can also zip through to the things that they wanna see. Very, very, clear how you can do that, so.
Yeah. It also protects the people on the boards, and, you know, and committees, because, you know, we want to discuss transparently what we think and what we see, because that's our contribution to our town. And so you don't want to memorialize saying, you know, so-and-so did not agree with the brand of tea that person brought it, or something like that.
Just wanted to chime in,
Sorry,
Commissioner.
Robert. Yes, so,
Personal attack.
I'll make you some chai.
That's a personal
Commission
attack.
Clerk Amanda Blaze raised an excellent point and answered that the minutes, and what is contained in the minutes usually is determined via the chair and the secretary of that respective commission. Some boards and commissions like a lot of detail. Some boards and commissions wanna follow, as Vice Chair Hanold said, more to Robert rules and be more plain, direct to the point, short and sweet. So it depends on the board and commission, so the public should feel, completely emboldened to reach out to the chair, find out who it is, and let them know. And if the chair, being the great public servant that they are, that they volunteered, they would be open to their minutes being more detailed. But just so everybody knows, it is dependent on the chair and the secretary deciding how they want the minutes. This commission does appreciate public comment, and Ms. Blaze does always add it to the minutes as well.
So is it worth opining on that level of discretion in the charter?
Because the charter refers to the Robert's Rules of Orders.
Yeah, so it already says Robert's Rules of Order, right?
It does not adopt Robert's Rules of Order,
No.
that's left up to the individual boards and commissions. But the Freedom of Information Act has requirements for things, and that's what the board and commission has to follow, and basically tracks Robert's Rules of Order. It's who spoke, who appeared, there's no requirement for commentary about what was said.
So I'm trying to balance the requirement of the public to rightfully know what's going on. At the same time, these are public servants who are volunteers, and, you know, you don't want them to be inundated. So perhaps if we said Robert's Rules of Order and those rules are established, that safeguards both parties.
Okay. We're discussing
Yeah.
So we're gonna move on to minutes.
minutes.
They're very thorough.
You were awesome.
It's a big 7:30.
So we've got the March 5th, 2025 minutes to approve. Does anybody have any comments or changes to the minutes that Ms. Blaze has provided us?
There's just one typo that I made.
Okay. What
Line
line?
70, we not discussed, but we discussed, but that's the only thing I found in there.
Yes.
So that's the only typo, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. Can you repeat that?
Line 70.
It should read discuss.
Yeah, that
It-
says, it's,
It's spelled wrong, discuss charter board
I know,
commission
minor, but
comments.
that was everything I saw.
Please don't apologize for correcting that.
I like-
That's literally a very important feature
Yes.
of.
Anybody else have any other changes and or comments?
I move that we approve the minutes of March 5th, subject to correction.
Okay.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. The last item on our agenda,
Adjournment.
Is this,
No,
no,
it's
it's
a
a really
draft
tiny chart
town-
that you talked about.
Is it the tiny show?
the commission
It
research.
is the tiny chart.
It's a tiny chart.
All right.
Forever now, we know it's a tiny chart.
You know what, it's a lot of info.
But before, we go into the tiny chart, can I just make a motion? Poor Franklin, we're older than you.
Oh, this
We
was-
all have glasses.
Yeah. I'm like,
Um, I just wanna make a motion to add to the agenda that we need to discuss what we'd like to have on our agenda for the next meeting. So, I'm gonna make a motion that we amend the agenda to add discussion about the next agenda at the end of
Next month.
because I don't wanna be the only one with Paul and Jeff deciding what's on the agenda, so, do I have a second for that?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Great, thanks. Just wanna be official. All right, so the time chart. We're gonna have to come up with another.
No, I like it.
So as the name states, this is just a draft.
Right.
Madam Chair Barnett just wanted me to get a sheet incorporating all the information that you're working through, as in the comments you're getting, where certain boards and commissions are established, and a column for your recommendations. I sent all of you, for the public's sake, the Excel version of this. You all have your own sheet that you can add your information, and as you see fit. I just wanted to print something to have it on the packet for you today. And the ones that are indented to the right show that I did an exhaustive search, and those are all the locations that I have found mentions of those boards or commissions, and the ones on the left I have not completed yet. And this is a draft and a work in progress, so I'm happy to take criticism and feedback on how you can make this look better, or how can I make it look better for your purposes.
No.
Smaller.
No,
Could
this
I
was
just
great.
ask, under comments received, when it says no presented or yes presented, what does that mean?
They presented in
It
person.
was in
And
person,
Yes.
but not, and so if it says no presented, nothing in writing, but
Yeah.
presented.
So, because we don't have comments from many of these board and commissions, and I know you've reached out to all of them, or you haven't reached out to all of them yet.
I have just reached out to, from our one of our initial meetings, just the chartered boards and commissions. Some of them were invited to physically present the
Right.
five, the
Right,
big
the big ones.
three in planning and zoning, and the rest, I was tasked with just sending them a letter, inviting them to comment, and then from there, we can gauge who we would need to bring in to speak physically. But no, I have not requested all boards and commissions submit comment. I am happy to do so if the commission would like that.
Well, we only really need comments from ones that are in the charter, right? We don't need code.
Well, except for one of the things that the Board of Selectmen asked us to look at is what commissions and boards should be,
Out of the charter.
I hate to say abolished, but
Retired.
retired, I like that one.
They're useless.
And there are, and there are some that really, I mean, I look at the recycling committee.
Recycling committee.
They're not on the charter, but they did ask us to look at all the boards, I don't know if that's, I don't know.
I have a question, should we ask the police commission to at least come and speak to us about what they do, so we have an understanding of it's such a big portion of the charter.
Well, we can talk about that in our next agenda item.
That's
Of
right.
who's, who we want to invite here again. But, forgive me, but I think in spreadsheets, that's the way my head works. So I thought it would be helpful, based on Ron's comments last time about this exhaustive list,
Yeah.
of trying to compile everything into one document, so we can at least keep track of
What we have.
and what we've received and who we've heard from and what we're charged with, because if it's a code only item, we don't need to be discussing it. If it's a charter item and it's something up for consideration on the Board of Selectmen's list of considerations, we wanna come up with recommendations of those things. So, I mean, I would imagine, based on our conversation today, we could add to planning and zoning that our recommendation is to leave it be. And so we can add those comments as we go, and I thought this was a good way of organizing the information, so when we start to do our discussions in our report, we had something concrete. So if you want anything added or changed to it, this is, like Franklin said, it's a work in progress, but it's the way my brain thinks.
It's really nice, I like it,
It's great stuff, good draft.
yes, it's good.
I'm gonna buy bigger paper.
I'm gonna rearrange
I'm
it.
kidding. So, do you want us to So this is for us to use, if you update anything, you'll update the spreadsheet for us, correct? Okay, based on your research or if we've received additional comments or anything like that, okay? And then we can keep notes to ourselves, and then when we start discussing all of these items, we've got this all in one place. Okay. Anybody have any other comments other than thanking Franklin for pulling this all together so quickly? Bravo.
Just so I can understand, the ones that are in red, so it says no, so you see it's not established by the charter or code, right?
Yes.
Some say board of selectmen temporary no's just say no, so the ones that just say no.
Yeah, they're not a board of selectmen, temporary committee,
So
and they're not established by charter or the code.
So how do they exist then?
That is a very good question.
Well, that goes to my question of how often is the code reviewed? And-
Yeah.
Take for example, the Eno Farm Subcommittee. That's not a temporary committee of the Board of Selectmen, that's just an ongoing subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen, two different things. Usually consisting of the members of the Board of Selectmen, and the subcommittee on the Eno Farms. So there's two different ways of organizing.
So I can mark the subcommittees that,
Yeah,
like finance subcommittee is a board of selectmen.
yeah, that's
sub-
right. Long-range planning subcommittee is
Yeah.
a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen.
Okay,
But we could probably, in terms of this discussion, keeping or executing different boards and commissions, there are some that are in the charter. There are others that are created by the Board of Selectmen, which has the power to do it or not. So unless those that we think some of those boards and commissions in the latter category are so important that we want to make them permanent fixtures of the town, which it seems no one has suggested, then I don't think we need to spend time with them. The only question, I mean, we should only be dealing with the ones that are currently in the charter.
right, I agree.
Yeah, a good example of that, again, is open space. It started off as a pink committee, temporary subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen, and it was a decision made that it really ought to be in the charter. ABC went in the other direction, it used to be in the charter, but it was determined by a previous commission that because of the changing nature of the work of the Economic Development Commission, we ought to leave the charter and go in ordinance, so the ordinance could reflect. the
But
current
it is in the charter.
It is in the charter,
The EDC is in the charter.
It's still there.
it's still there.
Oh, maybe the charter revision.
It's there
did take
and
it
it's
out.
in the code.
Okay, that's what happened.
It's in both.
Yeah, which is.
They have an ordinance about it and it's in the charter.
And how were those changes initiated? Was it because of the Board of Selectmen recommending to the previous charter commission that this is
Yeah,
what they
in some
recommended?
That's what I recall.
Yeah.
Like the open space is a good example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we touched open space though. I think we got rid of the Human Relations Commission, right? And then moved that over to somewhere else.
And
Design review was moved under zoning.
Yeah.
Right.
But we pretty much took the tack that Bert's laid out. We just stuck to the charter. You know, if the Board of Selectmen doesn't want to deal with the recycling committee or doesn't feel it's necessary anymore,
Then they
got the
just,
power to
Can't get rid of it.
right,
Yeah, you could
Yeah.
almost review the red ones and say, do we wanna deal with that or not? And if no, then just, you know.
just move on.
Alright.
Or just say BOS to review if necessary anymore. Just, that's our recommendation.
Yeah,
That's a good
this
point.
sheet,
I
this sheet is just a master sheet.
No, it's good.
all boards and commissions, and I think from here, like Attorney DiPresento mentioned, you can, and Commissioner Halpin, you can just cut it, read it, tell me move it to a new tab, we can do it, we can make it look exactly how you want. We can look at just the chartered ones, you can look at ones that are iffy, however you wanna do, I can move it in tabs, I just need direction, I'll do it.
And can I just say for the public, I'm in no way or shape or form suggesting that the Board of Selectmen is looking at the recycling committee, that was just the one that was at the tip of my tongue.
I'm saying, it's the one that just, yeah.
That's my, that's.
Yep, still recycled.
Still recycled.
I'm just glad I don't have to separate anymore.
Right.
No, I think this is very helpful because
Yeah, it's.
when they, especially when the Board of Selectmen said we're all new and we just got the pin and didn't get a book, I know you guys are working on it. I don't know if they all knew there were this many commissions and boards, to be honest, when you first learn about town government, it's like, wow, we have that many commissions and subcommittees, it's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Which is the reason, sorry to add, why they tasked one of their recommendations for you to look at
Right.
it and seeing which ones are dormant.
Right.
Because we do, have a lot of open commissions.
Right.
Do we know which ones are dormant? Like, how do we decide what's dormant?
I think we posed,
I think
did
we-
you
I
pose
think
that
we
question
know.
to the board of selectmen?
I don't think-
The first selectman?
Yeah, every one of them kicked it back to us.
Yeah, they didn't
They
wanna,
were-
they didn't wanna make a
Yeah,
comment
yeah,
about
exactly.
what they thought was dormant and what was needed or not needed, and
Yeah, this is like that cardboard box, right? The moment you throw it away, after 20 years, you need the box.
Right,
Yes.
exactly, yeah.
With all the cords.
One
and-
place-
Yeah,
Good point.
Exactly.
One way to look at it is look at the minutes for the last 2 years and see how many times they've met,
Yeah.
see what work they're doing. It's not definitive, but it would be a good start.
I mean, I didn't know we had a flood and erosion control board, not that I don't think it's
Fire
important.
department.
Sure.
It is. Do we
Yeah.
have one?
Yeah,
We
it's there.
served on it.
Could we add a column that states the number of times they met last year, just so we know how many times they met? And it'd be a good place to start.
For calendar year 2024, I can do that.
You can do that?
Yeah,
Another
looking
one?
at, that won't be hard at all.
Yeah.
So which ones? All of them? Yeah, that's no problem.
Yeah.
Just let me know.
Okay,
All
yeah,
of them?
yeah.
Gotcha.
And then if we see some outliers, we can say, hey, what was that one?
If it's zero, I mean.
That's a good place to start.
Yeah.
That's an easy one.
Well, I guess the next place to start would be after that is if we go out and reach out to them and ask them for comments and we don't get a response, they might not be there.
As long as anybody
That's
else.
pretty hard, you know, I mean, we're talking about you and, you know, we want comments and if you don't provide them.
We're getting rid of your board.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I would not say that frankly.
I did not say that.
No, but I mean, it would speak to the
Yeah.
importance of it, right?
Tell me 5 things you did last year. I'm sorry, Chair, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Chair,
I sent that email in.
It's too easy sometimes.
5 years.
Yeah, that would be a good place to start because I don't know all of this. I'd love to know more about this.
And some of us may have insight to some of the committees, but some of them, like,
No, that's a good addition with the number of meetings, and then we
Yeah.
can start from there, so,
There's always a story behind the story, like the Fair Rent Commission, you're not gonna find a lot of meetings, because it's based on complaints received.
right,
But
but you need a fair rent
the
commission.
state statute says you
Now.
shall
Right.
have fair rent commissions.
And that gives us the understanding.
Actually, they've had recent meetings,
Well, didn't they just reform it?
Yeah, well,
they did, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I was on the board of ethics, we meet once a year to schedule a meeting, so we're gonna cancel it.
yeah, because their ethics charges are brought up,
Somebody complain?
which is good.
yeah.
Like some we may not be able to get rid of because.
Yes,
Well, I mean, you shouldn't get rid of like the Board of Ethics, but, you know.
Yeah.
but at least you'll know.
But yeah, so at least we know what we're up against,
Yeah.
you know, what we can,
Right.
we cannot do.
So Madam Chair, do you want me to reach out to all of them, or just do for now, the 2024, how many times they met?
Let's do that, 'cause I think you
I
want
would do
that
that
exercise
first,
Yeah.
Cause
Gotcha.
that will save
The
you,
first step.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
we don't want you to do some work that is unnecessary.
And there's some pretty obvious ones that.
Because you're supporting us a
Correct.
lot anyway, and I appreciate you being able to pull this together for this meeting, because I thought
No.
it clarified some things.
Did you hear anything back on the separation of the cultural, from the parks and recreation, or what's going on with
So,
that?
yes, at the Board of Selectmen meeting, if you wanna watch their discussion regarding that, I believe it starts at 48 minutes and 55 seconds.
And they actually said the charter,
And they refer to
us to say,
And
we should be
so-
watching that meeting.
So it is off of our plate, as I understand it from the Board of Selectmen meeting, because it's a policy, not a process. And therefore, the signers of the letter that was presented to us at the last meeting are not going to present to us because it's in the Board of Selectmen's on their table right now, so
Okay.
that's.
The wheels are turning.
The wheels are, that's what's up, and, you know, whatever they decide, I mean, I suppose if they want us to consider it for the charter, they would need to amend their list of recommendations to us.
You need to be clear that you decide what you want.
Well, no, yes, we're clear, yes, however, I'm sure you saw the letter.
I did not see the letter, but I'm made aware today
Of the
saw some
letter.
things today, made aware of the letter.
So at our last meeting, it was the first time we saw the letter, and because we all decided that it was more of a policy versus a process, we referred it back to the Board of Selectmen,
It's up to your judgment.
because, so,
Lot more
if
questions
they
than
wanna,
answers.
if, at this point,
So
I
are
guess-
they thinking of creating a subcommittee?
I don't know what they're thinking, but
So right now, it's off our plate.
it's off our plate at the moment, but
Or
if you're
48
curious
minutes.
about the discussion, it is 48 minutes into their meeting.
And 55
And
seconds.
55 seconds. I wrote that down. Because a minute is a lot of time to watch something you're not, you know.
Not interested in watching.
It was nice to hear though that some of the Board of Selectmen members are watching this meeting. One or two of them mentioned it at that meeting, that they are watching if they can't attend, they are either live watching or going back and watching this Charter Review Commission, so they find it very important, I think. Everything that's about that, you know, they're in tune with it as well, and how important what we're doing is for our whole town. So it's kind of encouraging to hear from our Board of Selectmen as well.
So the last item on our agenda is the one I amended, so discussing next agenda, and I think, in my opinion, and we've heard from all of the Board of Selectmen, I think we need to invite the town manager to present, to get that side, right? And you mentioned the police commission. Does anybody have any other thoughts about, who we might want to hear from at our next meeting? So Franklin can reach out to them to see if they can attend. Or anything that we wanna start discussing.
Well, we still have time before the agenda is drafted.
Yes.
If you think of anything.
Yeah.
You know.
But we'd like
between
some
now and,
input.
You know, say the next week or so.
But, I mean, does anybody disagree that we should be inviting the town manager in front of us at this point? I mean, we need to hear, I think it's appropriate now that we've heard from all the selectmen that we hear from Mark. And that the police commission's a good one, I don't think we've missed any other.
That's the only one that's on this list where I feel that we really need to hear from them. Everyone else is more or less okay.
Does the statute constrain us on the police commission at all? That was the only question.
Yeah.
That question comes up quite a bit, depending on what the police commission wants to do or not do. It's my opinion that this police commission was created by the charter.
Okay.
Therefore, the charter police commission preempts the statutory enabling act that allows you to, it's like a board of finance. This board of finance is under the charter. If you didn't have the charter provision, there's a board of finance set of statutes which you could take advantage of. There's also an ordinance on the board, on the police commission, so it's really a good idea to look at all that.
If we do have it, it's good to see what that ordinance is though, and compare that to what's in the charter.
Yeah, it's nearly identical.
Is it?
Yeah, but definitely looking at them both is a good idea. And the statute.
Right.
Statute's similar, is what you're saying.
It's very similar, but in some respects, the charter has more than the statute, some more powers to the police commission, in some cases has less.
In some towns, doesn't the police commission appoint the police chief and the officers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and here it's a dual role,
Right.
recommend to the board of selectmen.
Because if you think about it from an umbrella perspective, we've heard from the selectmen, they are elected representatives, education, finance, and public safety. Those are the big things. And so, the only thing missing in my mind is, and also I come from law enforcement, I'm like, where are my officers? I never want to hear from them.
There's no police department set up in the charter.
Yeah.
Weird.
police commission.
Yes,
There's a commission to
There's a
oversee a
police
department that
commission,
doesn't exist.
and there's a department head, the police chief, is an town officer created in the charter. There's no police department.
Simsbury didn't have a police department until 1958. At which point, if it was prior to that, was it just the state police?
There were sheriffs,
Uh,
constables.
There was constables,
And
right,
probably right.
and the state police, right, state trooper.
Most towns. it was the state
So in Vermont, most times I like that still.
Yeah,
Madam Chair, do you want me to reach out for them to the police commission chair to come present or submit written comment?
I think presenting, because it gives an opportunity for an exchange of information versus,
Yeah, exchange of ideas, because I have,
and definitely Mark to present.
It's good to do that at a night when we're meeting with the town manager too, because there's some interplay
Yeah.
between the town manager's role and the police commission's role in the area of collective bargaining and human relations and personnel that probably needs to be discussed.
Do you want the police chief at all involved in, or in this, at this
No,
stage?
because he's in a- No,
He's not.
Or solicit his thoughts?
Say not unless he wants.
he's a nice guy.
That's for the commission to decide if the
Oh.
police chief's opinion regarding the police commission is valuable or
I
not.
would leave it up to him.
Just if he wants, and I don't see why not, but.
let's see what happens, and then maybe if we feel that we want to hear, then we can ask. But that's a really good.
He's very nice.
Are there any other news, boards that we wanna get either written comments on, or like board of ethics, or economic?
Bert says they don't meet.
I mean,
Do you think it, going back to the police, I have a very quick question. Do you think it would be worth asking the police chief for written comments, just to save their time?
Do you mean and for them or instead?
Instead,
No, just the chief.
we're gonna have the police commission
Oh,
present.
she, oh, sorry,
The
I.
chief, yeah, the
She
chief.
said, okay.
Yeah,
might say
Only if you want.
Only if he wants to, I wouldn't make it. I mean, in my mind, some of these other boards that I think are important to hear from, in my mind, is Culture Parks and Rec, because their budget is very large. And even though we got a letter, it wasn't from the commission, it was from Dave, the chair of the commission, but it wasn't from the commission, like we did. I would like Culture Parks and Rec to come in front of us.
As the
As the
Call
commission.
it Parks and Commission, not the department, I just wanna confirm.
And then
Yeah, okay.
open space keeps coming up. You know, we've heard a lot of public comments about open space, and there have been some, because open space committee is made up of representatives from various boards, including the Board of Selectmen.
And some, yeah,
And
some
some
have
public.
said is that the appropriate structure.
Right. So I think that's worth hearing from, because there's been some question about that,
Yeah.
about the structure of it and the makeup of it.
But you're not, are you suggesting that they be on the same?
No, no.
Next few.
just trying to figure out.
Yes.
Just trying to think about future,
Yeah.
because, you know, it takes some coordination to get them to appear. So if we ask the police commission and the town manager to appear at our next meeting, if they're available,
That's enough for one.
that's enough for one meeting.
Yeah.
The town manager is enough for one
You
meeting.
think Kevin talked a lot?
So,
Sorry, Kevin.
no, you didn't get it. It's just the whole, it's, the topic, it's a lot of conversation. That's enough for one meeting.
Yeah.
And then, we can reassess at our next meeting. So if you could add an agenda item, and we'll just make note of it every time that discussion about, our next meeting, so we're
Yes.
collaboratively talking about what we wanna see on our agendas, that would be, great.
So you're talking town manager, police commission, open space, park and rec.
Yeah.
Okay.
For the next meeting, I heard that Culture Parks and Rec Commission and open space was just an idea.
Not for the next meeting,
Not for next
for a
meeting.
future meeting,
Yes, gotcha.
not for the next meeting.
It would be a good time to make the letter from the Board of Selectmen into a checklist. and start checking off what you've done,
Oh, that's a good idea.
you know, see where you need to
Yeah.
go. Make sure you cover everything.
Yep, that's the way my brain works too. Checklists and spreadsheets.
How do we start doing a draft? Like
Right.
Kevin made a couple of good points. Like if we wanted to look at, well, what would it look like if the first select person became the chair of the Board of Selectmen? Where would that fit? How would that look?
Yeah,
What if, you know, we wanted to do something regarding the Carver policy governance? He suggested where we go. That's only two that I'm thinking of because Kevin was here and I thought he laid things out pretty well. But where would we start doing
I
that
don't
as a
think it's
draft?
too
Is it too
early, no, we could put together a draft report, and it could, what we did last time, and it's up to you whether you wanna change it or not, is one of the section of the report was all the people that spoke to you, and because the minutes are so complete, it would be easy enough to, you know, on this date, the commission heard from the following, and then list the speakers and what they said. And on this date, same thing. And then, Franco and I could work on a draft template report, entirely subject to you changing it, but at least you'd have something to build on. Because what you're gonna come up with is a report and a recommended charter, or, you know, revised charter, or not. You could say it's fine just the way it is, we're not changing anything, or you could say, we recommend the following revisions, which is really a red line version of the charter with the report explaining why you decided on those recommendations. But we have the Word document from the last time, we could start there,
Yeah.
and if you wanna add to it, subtract, change it, or that's.
Because I think we need to start memorializing some of these
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah, cause you
before they get
can momentum
lost.
that way, and you,
Yeah.
you know, you
And it's really helpful to the next commission because the previous report was very helpful to me.
yeah,
You know, I had,
it's very complete.
it was very well done, so I found it valuable.
This one will be better.
And in a larger
Am I right?
You thought she was gonna say, cause you're here.
I'll
Now,
say it, you got a guy who's really.
That's
He
right.
loves this stuff.
so if we make even any minor change to the charter, does that have to go to?
Yes,
Yes.
Even if it's,
you change one
If
word.
it's a
One
spelling
it's
error,
a spelling
yes.
error, or we change it to.
Absolutely,
like,
everything has to
person
go
or-
to them.
Okay, just, I wasn't sure.
Last time we did all the gender language. we
Well, we're gonna
probably
do it
didn't
again.
Probably didn't do it perfectly, but it affected every section of the charter.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
wasn't sure.
Well, it's gonna have a red line in a lot of places again, because it's,
Yeah, well, you know,
yeah, times change,
at the time, it was the, you know, the most current way to do it.
Right.
but
times change.
We know differently now.
Okay.
And did we have and I forget, forgive me, and I did not see it in the minutes, but that was me. We thanked all the people that have given, on the commission so far, that have given their report. They don't expect us to go reply to all their inputs.
No, our reply is our report.
Okay, I just wasn't making sure, like, well, why didn't
No.
you take this into account?
Well, I've emailed the people that have emailed, thank you,
Okay.
will transmit to the commission.
Thank you, that's.
Well, I didn't really necessarily thank them, I thanked them for their submission,
For the
yes.
submission and not,
But
yes.
we have no obligation to get back to
No.
any one of them. Okay, I
Well,
just-
it's not really back and forth.
Yeah,
Right, exactly.
okay, I just wanna make sure.
When we put together the draft report, for instance, on planning and zoning, we will reference all the planners you heard from, written form.
Just so we have a, yeah,
No,
history of
yeah.
who,
Right,
what we listened to.
right.
Or
Because the
heard
next
from.
commission will wanna look back on that report and pick up where you left off,
That's right.
rather than searching around the boxes in the town clerk's office.
And then Paul will come back again and give it to you.
And Jeff.
And Jeff.
Just Paul. Just Paul.
Just Paul.
Thanks, Jeff. You're real helpful, you're real helpful.
Getting on for sure.
Paul will tell you the toughest charter was that one from 1676.
Oh my God.
And he knows
You
where
have
to
just as
find
much
it.
gray hair as I do.
Yeah, he knows where to find it because he gave me that photo.
Yeah, that's right.
There's everything in it.
All right, so do I have,
Just one last comment
yes.
from your March 5th meeting, we discussed the DEI Council preamble. One of the questions to
Bob, was, is a preamble to the charter allowed?
Preamble to, yeah, I think it is. It's whatever you wanna put in there. If it's not disallowed, it's allowed, there's a clear time. The town's not.
But I
think we were
I
leaning
thought
towards not doing it.
I thought we were leaning towards recommending it as something that the board of selectmen adopted in the
Yes.
code.
Right.
I think that's how we ended, right?
Is this the
Yeah,
DEI?
that's right.
The DEI.
They made a recommendation for a preamble
Right,
to the charter, a preamble to the charter.
charter, yes.
And preambles are not binding, right? They're like,
No,
they're
it's
like,
predatory, it's not,
yeah,
it's not regulatory.
Yeah.
It's like whereas clauses. and-
yeah.
But it does give the reader some bit of overall intent.
Yeah, and the context behind it, that's,
Yeah.
it's not meant to be binding.
The preamble to the United States Constitution starts with words that everybody remembers, so they remember a bunch else.
That's because you watch cartoons on Saturday and you listen to that cartoon.
I was watching Bugs Bunny.
So give a motion, is there a second?
Oh, there's a second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all for your time.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town.
Bringing us together through local programming,
Education and live broadcasts.
SEM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community, ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings, and celebrating milestones.
like our high school graduations.
But today, SEM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions. And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SEM receives less revenue.
Even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
We need your support.
We need your support. We need your support.
we need your support.
Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open.
Continues to educate our youth and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SEM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive.
For generations to come.
Visit our website
Or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media.
where your town
Your schools
and your government come together.